Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Locke, welcoming you to this March edition of Citizens Bulletin, the program that helps you know your role as an informed Pennsylvania citizen, with our host, Ashley Klingensmith, who is the Pennsylvania State Director for Americans for Prosperity. Hi, Ashley.
Susan, how are you? It's so good to be here. I hope it's a lucky week ahead for everyone, St. Patrick's Day, so it's wonderful to be joining you.
Oh, yes, indeed. I'm well and hope you are too. And we're really looking forward to the report that you have and the information you have to share today. So please go ahead.
Fantastic. Well, it is great to be here and be with everyone and talk about an issue that should be at the forefront of everyone's mind as we navigate the next 2 months through primary day, which is May 18th. And hopefully we will need no luck that day, because as many members of our electorate in this Commonwealth as possible are going to be knowledgeable and ready to vote yes on the 3 ballot questions, which will be appearing on the ballot. So we are going to have a very robust discussion today about how we got here, what you're going to see on the ballot, and what you can do between now and primary election day to get prepared, prepare your friends, family, and neighbors to also vote. But I just want to welcome Grant Gulaban, our Deputy State Director, who is doing the lion's share of work on this issue. And so we will get into it. But first, I just want to welcome you, Grant. How are you?
Oh, very, very, very well, Ashley. Thanks for having me on.
Great. Awesome. Well, I want to just start by talking a little bit about and just setting the stage with respect to how we got here. So March 6th of 2020, so over a calendar year ago, is the date that Governor Wolf signed his first proclamation of disaster emergency in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And Grant, I believe this is right. So at that proclamation carries with it a 90-day window, which allows the governor and his administration to do what exactly? What do they get the opportunity to do that's different in the purview of that disaster response?
Well, it gives the governor and the executive branch wide discretion in terms of suspending certain state laws or regulations, and also the governor can issue orders and proclamations that have the force of law in order to respond to a declared disaster. And so since, as you said, since March 6th of last year, the governor's issued not just the original, but now 4 90-day extensions of that disaster declaration, with the latest one, ironically, carrying us right through the primary election, as you mentioned. And,
okay, Grant, I'm sorry. Did you say he's issued 3 additional proclamations since the original one in March of last year? Oh my goodness, 4 total.
The 4th extension, yes. So that's taken us through an entire calendar year, and
wow.
and we've all seen a great deal of the effects of those shutdowns. I mean, obviously, ostensibly, these are intended to deal with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so the governor has, as many of us are certainly aware, placed restrictions on a number of types of business activities, the size and scope of public gatherings, rules affecting the ability of children to be able to learn in person at school and to be able to participate in extracurricular activities. And, the original order breaking us into essential and non-essential, or life-sustaining and non-life-sustaining businesses, which has caused a great deal of disruption, of course, not only for business owners, for families, for children in school. It's just, again, in the name of attempting to combat the coronavirus pandemic, but as things have gone on and we've gathered more data, more information about the effects of the pandemic and what effects the shutdowns have had on Pennsylvanians. There have been many attempts by individual Pennsylvanians and also through their elected representatives in the General Assembly to try to provide input to the governor and his administration as they've been managing the disaster throughout the declaration. However, there has not been much, if any, interest from the governor and his administration in terms of getting input from anyone outside of their silos within the executive branch, and they've in fact been, in many cases, downright hostile to those ideas, and not really provided much, if any, justification for a number of decisions they've made.
That's exactly right. And didn't the legislature try to get to a place where we were trying to apply facts and data to some of the industry closures? What they try to do is pass individual kind of reopening bills that were geared towards specific industries. So, for example, car dealerships. I think there was a real estate reopening bill, and send that to the governor and pray that maybe, in his veto or just, lack of signing and letting those become law, that maybe we would glean some insight as to why those being closed was striking at the heart of a COVID response. But did that ever really happen?
Well, the General Assembly, a number of times throughout the last legislative session, made attempts, as you said, on an individual basis to try to reopen various sectors of the economy. I mean, the probably most prominent were for restaurants, bars, and taverns, being able to get them back to being able to have a sufficient amount of in-person dining capacity to be able to survive and stay in business, because we've seen a number of small businesses, of all types, go under for good here because of the restrictions that have been placed on them by the governor, and with that attendant loss of jobs and loss of income and loss of opportunity in those Pennsylvania communities. Also, there have been a number of attempts to deal with things like being able to have parents be in person at their children's scholastic sporting events. And the interesting thing about a lot of these, Ashley, is that whenever there were original votes on the original pieces of legislation, you had pretty substantial bipartisan support. You had a number of Democrats joining with Republicans to say that, hey, we need to open back up here. We can do it safely and in a way that protects public health, but we need to be able to restore the rights of individuals to be able to operate their businesses, be able to work and protect their livelihoods. And unfortunately, whenever those bills came back after the governor vetoed them, unfortunately enough, Democrats changed their minds in order to sustain the governor's vetoes. So that hasn't been an effective way of trying to reopen Pennsylvania.
Right. And so that brings us to why this primary is so important. So can you talk about, first of all, kind of the legislation that was passed last session and then again this session in the first couple of weeks, I believe, of this 2021-22 session, that is going to allow Pennsylvanians to really have the final say?
Yes, the General Assembly last summer had passed a bill or a joint resolution, rather, that contained 3 different constitutional amendments, one of which deals with amending the state constitution to ensure protections against discrimination by race and by gender. And so, that one is not necessarily related, though, to what we're talking about here, although it's important and we support it. But the other 2 amendments both dealt with the exercise of a governor's emergency powers. The first of the 2 said that in the future, the state constitution would be amended to provide for only a 21-day limit on the length of a disaster declaration that the governor could issue, without then, at the end of 21 days, going to the legislature and getting explicit approval to continue the declaration. Otherwise, if the legislature does not approve that, it means that the that the governor cannot continue with the declaration. I mean, that this is intended to again, provide a check and balance between the power of the governor and the power of the legislature, not for the legislature to oversee to oversee, but not to manage or micromanage an emergency response, but simply to provide oversight as it does for the executive branch in other ways in normal operation, and be able to make sure that the input of the citizens of Pennsylvania through their representatives is considered. The second of the two simply states that a governor, once having had a disaster declaration terminated by vote of the legislature, can't just turn back around and declare a substantially similar emergency in order to get around the ending of the original declaration. So again, both of these are intended to make sure that there are checks on the power of one individual, the governor, who should be invested with authority to be able to make decisions in a disaster emergency, but not indefinitely.
Right, and I think and this legislation and the idea to amend the Constitution in part was inspired by the fact that, hey, they tried to work with the administration and open up different, again, like you mentioned, parts of the economy through legislation that had bipartisan support, but were kind of stopped at every step of the way. And so this was the ultimate kind of opportunity to address this and make certain that far beyond Governor Wolf, that any future administration will have to work with the other branch, right? And yes. and really the branch that speaks for the people.
Absolutely, because our state representatives and senators are the closest elected officials to the people, and so their voices should be heard whenever decisions are being made that affect their lives and their livelihoods. And again, this isn't just a Governor Wolf thing. This is something that is aimed at making sure that any future governor is properly overseen in their exercise of this awesome authority. No matter how well-intentioned one individual may be, it's always dangerous to centralize that much power in one person. And so this just ensures that there are other voices being heard and that all Pennsylvanians are being represented.
That's exactly right. Well, I want everyone to know that tomorrow, March 16th, marks 2 months to Election Day. And so we are going to be unveiling our campaign. We have entitled it Final Say PA. And so that is the hashtag we encourage all of you to use. Hashtag Final Say PA on your Facebook posts and on your tweets that deal with this constitutional amendment and the ballot questions that will enable us to pass it. But we are going to launch a microsite tomorrow. So finalsaypa.com, and there will be, there will be a myriad of different resources that are housed. Resources about the constitutional amendments themselves, about the ballot questions themselves, about the intent of the General Assembly. We're going to have a lot of interesting graphics that you can readily pin to your own social media channels, some great language that is already pre-drafted for Facebook posts and tweets, and also Instagram stories as well. And so we really encourage you to like us on Facebook by searching at PAAFP and follow us on Twitter at AFP Pennsylvania, because we are going to be pumping out a lot of messaging and a lot of resources, like I said, over the next 2 months. One of the other things that we're going to be doing is visiting groups all over the Commonwealth to just make certain they are aware, first of all, of the fact that there are ballot questions that are critical to vote on and to weigh in on. And second of all, just ensuring folks know, how they can vote. Of course, we still have mail-in voting and absentee voting, and how, and of course, when polls are open, and all of those details, ensuring they know how and when to get to the polls and make their voice heard. So we want you all to visit, again, finalsaypa.com. And if you do it today, as I mentioned, we're launching tomorrow, but if you visit that site today, it's going to direct you to our pledge. And that is entitled, Vote Yes to Restore Checks and Balances in Pennsylvania. And you can go ahead and sign that pledge, and then right after you sign it, you can share that you did that. And it's just a pledge that emphasizes the fact and promotes the fact that you are going to be someone that's going out and voting on May 18th. And again, municipal elections, election years, we know that they're not necessarily some of the most thrilling, but my goodness, I can't think of something more important after the past year, and the things that, and rules and regulations that we've all had to live under. I can't think of a more important reason to get out and vote. Grant, I know there's something else that's very important for folks to share with loved ones and friends about this primary. You know, in Pennsylvania, we of course have closed primaries, so you can only go and vote if you're a Republican or a Democrat. But this is different this year because of these ballot questions. Is that right?
That's right, because anytime that there is a ballot question on the primary ballot, independents, people who are registered with a party other than the Democrat or Republican Party can vote in the election in order to be able to vote on those ballot questions. And this is particularly important for all Pennsylvanians who care about, making sure that there are appropriate safeguards in place and checks and balances between the branches of government in terms of how decisions are made that affect your lives, like the ones that have been made by the Wolf administration during the COVID-19 pandemic without justification or without any kind of significant documentation underlying them. This is your opportunity to be able to make sure that you, through your representatives, always have a voice in how future declarations are managed.
That's exactly right. So he said unaffiliated independents. We also mean Green Party. We mean libertarians. We encourage everyone to get out, make your voice heard on these 3 ballot questions. You know, one of the things that we have spent this first quarter of the year talking about with members of our General Assembly and with members of our congressional delegation is how we can better prepare for the next crisis, how we can better position Pennsylvanians to navigate the next crisis, whatever that may be, because it's almost certain that at some point we're going to face something kind of as encompassing as a pandemic. And so what do we need to do? What lessons have we learned? And we certainly have learned that any concentration of power into one individual is not best for the lot. And so we have got to restore this check on our executive branch and reassert the legislature in the discussion around, what rules we have to live under, what can be operable, what cannot be, and this is the way to do it. And so, Grant, I want to just give you the final say, and I'll direct people one more time to the finalsaypa.com and encourage folks to just sign that pledge entitled Vote Yes to Restore Checks and Balances in Pennsylvania. But Grant, I want to give you the last word. I hope we've covered, Susan, kind of what brought us to this place and needing to go to the length of actually amending our Constitution. And it's because the legislature repeatedly tried to act throughout the past calendar year and came up against a wall in the governor. And so this is just going to provide an opportunity for the General Assembly to have a say in what is happening and the length of these disaster emergencies. And we all think that's a very good thing. And so, Grant, I want to give you the final say. And then, Susan, if there's anything that you think would be helpful that we cover, please jump in.
Thank you.
No. Well, no, thank you, Ashley. And I'll just make two quick points that are related here. I mean, first of all, we're going to, as the next couple of months go on, you're going to hear the governor and his supporters talk a lot about, the horrible things that will happen if the General Assembly is given the power to, in essence, make your voice heard on the management of disaster declarations. In fact, they've written the ballot questions in such a way that's intended to scare Pennsylvanians and to obscure what the real meaning behind these two amendments would be, trying to make the case that, if we do this, then the governor and state government will be powerless to be able to respond to emergency declarations, will lose out on federal funding, and all dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria, that they'll be that will happen. But in reality, all that happens here is that the General Assembly gets to vote, and they can vote yes to extend the declaration. If the case is made and evidence is presented that a declaration needs to continue, I would think that our elected representatives are capable of weighing the evidence and voting yes if circumstances warrant. But right now, we don't have any information, or we're not getting the information that would allow our representatives to be able to, in good conscience, support a number of the things that the governor has done and continues to do. And all this would ensure that those voices are heard and that the best possible decisions are made for the lives and the livelihoods of all Pennsylvanians. So again, thank you to everyone, and we look forward to engaging with you and for you to make your friends and neighbors aware that this is on the ballot, and we need a yes vote in order to have the final say on these decisions that affect our lives.
Absolutely. Susan, thank you so much. Do you feel that there's anything we maybe should touch on that we haven't?
Well, I just think it's very important, really important for people to take this to heart, this information that you give them. We have 2 months, and everyone really needs to understand how important it is to vote on these things. And also, I'm sure many are wondering why the court system didn't help us out here. So it's just really important to make these changes so that we don't run into this kind of situation again. Too many people have been hurt very badly. So we really appreciate this information. Thank you.
Of course, we look forward to seeing everyone out at the polls on May 18th. We are going to be having representation at some of the biggest polls around the state, talking with folks about these ballot questions, making sure they are for questions 1, 2, 3, that they're a yes, yes, yes. And so we really look forward to seeing folks out, and hopefully it's a beautiful day and we're able to get this done. The legislature has positioned us to have the final say as the electorate, and so now it's up to us.
Yes, indeed it is. Thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Grant. We really appreciate this information and the reminder of the duty that we all have to get out there and vote on these things. Thank you so much. Listeners, you've been listening to Citizens Bulletin, where you can learn to know your role as an informed Pennsylvania citizen. Ashley, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Have a wonderful week and month, and we look forward to being back in April.
Thank you. Yes, we'll look forward to that. Thank you both, you and Grant, for being with us today. Please join us again, everyone, next month.